Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of DEC Does What? I'm your host, Sean Mahar, along with
Erica Ringewald.
And we have a very special guest on the show today. Well, as you know, it's been a long, hot summer for many of us. And we wanted to have our extreme heat expert come on the show here today and talk about how the state is planning for increased hotter weather in the summertime coming up. Governor Hochul directed us in 2022 to create, along with NYSDEC, a multi-agency effort to come up with an extreme heat action plan in New York. And we're excited to be joined by Dr. Leo Bachinger, who was one of the spearheads of that for DEC. Leo, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I know we're having more what seems to me to be extremely hot days, but Leo, can you tell us why New York State needs an extreme heat action plan?
Sure. So we already see extreme heat impacting New York communities. It's considered the number one killer amongst extreme weather hazards across the U.S., impacting more people, killing more people than hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding combined, and we see similar impacts in New York State too. With climate change, and as climate change progresses, we will see more of those hot days, of those really hot days. They'll be longer, and they will be hotter than past days. And so we'll see more of those impacts of extreme heat across the state in communities that might not have seen extreme heat in that way before. And the plan is about addressing that, thinking about both the current impacts of extreme heat on our communities as well as preparing for future impacts.
So what is extreme heat? When you say extreme heat, right, people think about the temperature goes up in the summertime, but what makes it extreme and such a concern?
It's actually really tough to pin down this is the definition for extreme heat because it impacts and affects different people, different bodies, but also our environment or different communities in different ways. So there's not this one temperature and say this is super extreme hot now. For example, we see some heat health outcomes, like think about heat stroke, emergency department visits because of extreme heat start increasing already at 85 degrees Fahrenheit, which doesn't seem super extreme hot, but it relates to who's vulnerable to extreme heat, be it older adults, young children, expecting mothers, outdoor workers, and they're all exposed at different kinds of temperatures. It also really matters where you live. A 100-degree day in Phoenix, Arizona feels and will impact the community much different to, say, a community in Buffalo, New York that doesn't see that so often.
That makes sense.
And so when we talk about extreme heat and talk and inform our communities about extreme heat, it's often more useful to say it's just going to be really hot. And it might be unusually hot for this season than fixating on certain temperatures.
Isn't one of the critical pieces of extreme heat that the temperature overnight doesn't drop and sort of give people's bodies and the environment a reprieve?
Right. That's definitely a big deal. Also, the combination of heat and humidity, because that can limit how much our bodies can proactively cool us down. And then also what access you have to opportunities to cool down, be it do you have a forest nearby or a lake you can go swimming, or do you have cooling at your home or a community space you can go to? And that's often very unevenly distributed across New York State, but also across the communities.
So what were some of the things you learned about this planning process to create the Extreme Heat Action Plan? Was there something new that you didn't realize that extreme heat was impacting sensitive populations in some way? Or what was the first real thing where you said, wow, this is an incredible opportunity and I didn't know that about extreme heat?
That's a good question. I think there's a couple of aspects. Often we think about extreme heat as a matter of urban centers, right? First thing we think about maybe when you think about heat in New York State is New York City, the lower Hudson Valley. But we really don't see significant differences in terms of heat health outcomes between urban centers and rural communities. The reasons for those outcomes might be different. You might be more likely to work outdoors, or you might live further away from key resources if you're in a more rural community. It's harder to get to a hospital to seek help. But the number of emergency department visits, hospitalizations because of extreme heat are pretty much the same. That was one of the surprising things. The other is that while we think about older adults as a key vulnerable community or population group, we do see significant heat health outcomes with younger, like 20 to 30 year old men that work outside or in the restaurant industry and get exposed through that. So in this summer, for example, we saw that group as being a big part of the people that sought help in hospitals because of extreme heat.
So was it difficult to work with the, I think, 25 different agencies that we worked with on this plan? Was that a lot of herding the cats, or was there a lot of excitement and sort of momentum that was built through this planning process?
I think it was really exciting and almost surprising to me. I came into DC maybe a year before this planning process started. I've been working more on local communities on climate adaptation. And so the heat plan started, and it almost felt like the different agency partners were like ready to do this and take this on. And that was really exciting, including a lot of partners that we maybe didn't have as much opportunity to work on climate change issues just because it's not as squarely or as obviously in the center of what they do on a day-to-day basis. And so that was really great, getting to help nurture those different kinds of collaborations and then seeing those agencies advance and explore different solutions that they can take on and contribute to this plan was really.
So we talked about how the plan was developed with all these partners. Can you walk us through or share some highlights on the plan's recommendations?
Sure. The plan is organized in 4 what we call action tracks. Really how you can think about this is areas where we focus on taking action to support communities. And one of those areas is to build local community capacity, support local planning. So this is anything from opening up planning processes, streamlining them to better consider extreme heat, for example, in collaboration with the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services in the context of hazard mitigation planning. But also building community resources. Example is piloting resiliency hubs, supporting other forms of community resources that allow communities to take actions themselves. Another area is this whole nexus of long-term community preparedness, improving communications to communities, to different impacted stakeholder groups, but also workers, workplace safety, workers' health. This includes also scaling up access to, for example, cooling centers, or better coordinating and streamlining how different agencies communicate to different vulnerable groups. The third bucket of actions or focus area is focused on buildings and infrastructure and the built environment, but really from a perspective of how can we ensure the health and well-being of the people that occupy those built spaces. This extends from access to cooling at home, to making our schools safer, literally cooler places for learning, to thinking about how our built environment traps heat and how can we reduce that, what we call the urban heat island effect. And the fourth area of action or focus area is mainstreaming nature-based solutions across those different areas. So really working with nature, learning from nature to help cooler communities, keep our communities more thermally resilient, essentially robust against extreme heat, and helping in that way also build opportunity in communities by providing access to forestry trainings and associated jobs. So it's also embedded with green workforce development.
So let's stay on that natural and nature-based features. Like, what are the role, or what is the role that nature plays, and sort of what are those features that actually help address extreme heat in some level?
Nature and ecosystems more broadly are really good at helping balancing out things. This applies broadly to how we think about climate resilience, climate impacts. Healthy ecosystems provide this like natural buffer, but also balancing system. And extreme heat is actually a really good way of visualizing that and understanding that relationship. When we think about cities or even suburbs where there's a lot of parking spaces, a lot of concrete, a lot of asphalt, then we see that trapping and storing that heat, right? Like this heats up and then it becomes nighttime and it radiates back out, and it's like a baking oven. You never got a reprieve. If you have a lot of green space, a lot of forests, a lot of trees, they cool down naturally the environment. And so they can help keep communities cooler, but they also have a lot of health benefits, mental health benefits, as well as other climate benefits, right? They can absorb more water, prevent flooding, but also help with greenhouse gas mitigation. So they are this really awesome tool that we already have at our disposal and that we should strengthen to help address climate change more broadly, including for extreme heat.
That's great. And the governor has us on a 25 million tree march across the state. We planted a lot this spring, but obviously a focus on urban areas and environments is important, as you say, to helping to create those cooling opportunities naturally and really reforest areas and urban areas that where that can be a big impact. So interesting to hear. But I think staying on this topic too, what can New Yorkers do themselves in their daily lives to address this? And are there options at home, or what should average New Yorkers be aware of as it pertains to this action plan?
There are a range of different ways that New Yorkers can help themselves and their communities stay safe in extreme heat. One way is just to be heat aware, for the lack of a better word, not only for yourself, and that heat can sneak up on you and overwhelm you, but also by checking in on your neighbors, maybe deferring activities more to the evening or morning. So that's the one thing of keeping yourself and your neighbors, your pets safe. And the other is to get involved in your community, depending on what your capacities and resources are, right? Extreme heat has been impacting many communities in New York State for a long time. And communities have taken a lot of leadership in advancing key solutions. So we see here things like community organizations organizing neighbor-to-neighbor check-in networks, peer buddy programs, but also advancing tree planting initiatives. And so getting involved in those community efforts is a really good way to support heat resilience, but also take action on climate change more broadly while supporting your communities.
What would you identify as the priority actions to implement the Extreme Heat Action Plan?
There's a couple of things. One, it identifies actions that the different agency partners say that they want to take on in advance, which helps with moving the needle on bringing actions on the way that are tangible and outcomes-oriented. It also defines short and mid-range goals that help us stay targeted and focused on delivering outcomes for individual communities. Within that nexus, a lot of focus and priority lies on really helping impacted communities build their own capacities and resources and bolster that. And so there is a nexus of solutions. I mentioned already the resiliency hubs pilot, and similarly efforts to build out and support creation of cooling centers as means of building those resources in communities, but also enabling opportunities for communities to set up or enhance the training programs, the services to communities beyond an individual hazard. Another example is tree planting, and this really ties in nicely with the governor's 25 million trees initiative and the state reforestation plan, who seek to unlock those nature-based and ecosystem-based benefits more broadly. And so I think the common theme throughout the actions that we've included, but then also what I would describe as the priorities, are those that unlock multiple benefits, that has to want to do benefits for addressing multiple climate effects at once, but also building local capacities, but also helping us achieve our Climate Act goals. So transitioning from a lot of energy-intensive air conditioners to heat pumps, increasing weatherizations at home has a lot of those benefits, can do a lot of good. The same with community centers that might have fossil fuel-based heating. if we can transfer them to less carbon intensive or emissions neutral cooling and heating solutions, then that's a really great win in both ends as well, as some examples.
Are other states doing this kind of work, or is New York out in front, as usual?
We are out of front, but also learning a lot with other states at the same time.
Ever the diplomat.
Ever the diplomats. So California has done a lot of work, obviously also places like Phoenix, Arizona, places that experienced a lot of heat for much longer than we do. So there's a lot to learn there. At the same time, New York, along with some other states, are entering a territory where extreme heat is new and opportunities for solutions look differently, community situations look differently. And so we try to really, in the planning and the development of the plan, to engage with those communities and learn from them, understand their needs, which I think stands out in comparison to other partners. And so what has been really rewarding from the perspective of looking towards other states has been that we had the opportunity to exchange and learn from each other and be in these conversations through different forums.
That's awesome. To quote you, Leo, Buffalo is not Phoenix.
Buffalo is not Phoenix.
So, Leo, is this something you went to school for, extreme heat, or was this something that sort of fell in your lap because we had a priority and we had to implement it? Like, how did you become involved in writing this plan?
This extreme heat action plan is kind of like full circle from more or less where I started off with. In my early, I earned my degree in sociology, and doing that work as a student, as a bachelor student, I worked on some research projects that looked more about like how older adults are aging in place, how technology is affected. But in doing so, I learned about the impacts of climate change on those communities, and especially extreme heat. As you might hear from my accent, I'm originally from Austria. And Europe had in 2003 a really, really big heat wave that kind of hit the continent unexpectedly. 60,000 people died in less than a month, which is a huge number. But it's not in the collective memory that way as if it would have been a hurricane. It's not as visual, but it's also because of who's impacted by that. It's older adults, it's drug users, it's people experiencing mental health challenges, homeless people. And so that brought me into this like world of climate change, and really first from a research perspective, trying to understand how can we shape climate policies, how can we look at climate change adaptation in a way that can help those communities at the margins, which historically have always borne the brunt of the impacts of environmental disasters, of climate disasters, of catastrophes more broadly. And so that's what I continue to study in my research, in my education. I worked then in local communities here in New York and in Europe to advance local solutions, and joined DEC, and a month later the extreme heat plan was announced. So it was like back to the roots on extreme heat and climate change, what really got me into this work. And so, yeah.
So what brought you to DEC in the first place? Like, how did you find out about us coming from Austria to here in New York and wanted to get involved with our awesome agency?
Well, I was driving past the central office building a lot, but...
the Green Dome.
The Green Dome. I just wanted to sit under the Green Dome.
Awesome.
and bask in the green lights that it produces. I was working on environmental justice, climate change issues coming here, and I came here to earn my degree in a social science program at RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute here in Troy, just across the river. And that program was really focused on how can science and research help impact the communities through the work they do and working with communities. And so some of the first experiences were going into different communities that thought about environmental challenges, but also tried to advance solutions. And with that, I got more and more involved and interested, not only by way of my research, but also working in the communities and how New York State tries to protect its natural resources, how it tries to protect people and their environmental health. And DC seemed like a really awesome place that does a lot of important work, and I wanted to help shape that.
Well, we're definitely glad that you are part of this team in here helping to shape this work. So, with an eye towards implementation, what are you most excited about, or what are you like really focused on when it comes to implementing this plan? And what are you most heated up about in that regard?
Heated up.
Couldn't resist.
Yeah.
You.
Could not.
I'm trying to avoid making too many heat puns throughout
Me too.
my day.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I think, like generally throughout my work, and I'm always excited to work with communities on advancing solutions. So there's a lot of a range of actions with that DEC is lead on that helps advance that. We are having what I think is a really exciting project that tries to understand the physical exposure to extreme heat. It's an urban heat island mapping program that I think has a lot of potential in helping communities better understand where impacts occur, where the most vulnerable parts in their communities are, to help better target solutions to extreme heat, but also other impacts. And I think that could have a lot of positive impact and opportunity for advancing solutions in communities with communities. So I'm really excited about this project and advancing that, but also working and continuing to work with the various community partners in understanding what are emergent challenges, how are we responding, what can we learn from future heat waves, from future opportunities to further move the needle, both working with our different agency partners, but also locally. I think that's always the exciting stuff, right? Like, how can we make change that helps people happen? Yeah.
So, Leo, as a lover of winter myself, and obviously our climate change efforts are really helping to preserve winter, I'm just curious the interplay between extreme heat events and winter temperatures. And are we seeing, just a warming trend overall in all seasons? Do more extreme heat events in the summertime influence winter temperatures or precipitation in any way? And is there an interplay that you would say? And really, should I, look to get my hockey rink up later in the season this year? Should I be concerned about it? What do you say to that?
Especially after last winter.
Right. And I just finished building a snowboard, so I better hope there is some snow.
Safe space. I'm
Yeah.
right there with you, man.
I think that's a really key point, that we think about climate change and those individual effects together. So yes, this is an action plan that addresses extreme heat, but extreme heat doesn't occur in isolation one, right? Like, think about maybe there's a coastal storm or there's a flooding and it knocks out power, and then there's a heat wave. So we have to think about those things together. But we also have to think across seasons and communities. So one effect of more generally the climate, average temperatures rising, is that our lakes freeze later. They can take on more heat, more temperature, store that in that water. And then when we get an Arctic blow, as we had those polar vortices, then they produce more lake snow effect. So those big winter storms can, in the mid-range, happen more often as the lakes freeze later and impact our communities too. So it carries over in a way. We see winters stay warmer for longer, less snow, but then also more snow in certain ways. So it's not a one-on-one. We have climate change, so winters are over. There is a fluctuation and weird interactions in all of that, if that makes sense.
Unfortunately, it does make sense, Leo, and hopefully we can get back to a time where winters were normal and extreme heat wasn't so extreme. But we're glad to have you on the front lines with our climate team here at DEC, really helping to work with communities to plan for the future and really take the steps to keep New Yorkers protected while we advance our emissions reduction efforts and climate efforts overall. So thanks for being on the show today with here. And obviously, folks, check out dec.ny.gov for a copy of the Extreme Heat Action Plan. Really dive into that and reach out to Leo if you have any questions. I'm sure he'd be happy to talk to you.
Always happy to talk with everybody. And thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Dr. Leo.
Well, Erica, that was a real interesting conversation with Leo today on our extreme heat action planning process in New York.
Love Leo and the whole team.
Totally. They're really great. And you can learn more about the Extreme Heat Action Plan in New York by visiting dec.ny.gov and checking out that plan. But Erica, I know we've got a lot of other news going on and a lot of action items happening at Team DEC. What's happened since we took a little break over the summer?
So much. And now that we're moving into fall, it's not too late to participate in the 2024 iBird New York Challenge. It doesn't close until November 1st. We're really encouraging folks to go out and identify any 10 native New York State bird species.
Tweet, tweet.
And once you complete that task, you can get a patch and a certificate. You're also entered in a drawing for prizes. So it's a great way to get outside, spend some time in nature, appreciate the wildlife.
Definitely, and Governor Hochul with her whole Get Offline and Get Outside initiative that kicked off this summer. Definitely something moving into the fall, and bird watching is a great opportunity for anyone of all skills and abilities to get out and just listen and watch and see what you're seeing all around you. And birds are some of the easiest species to identify out in the wild, and the iBird New York Challenge is a really great opportunity to experience that in New York State.
100%. The other thing as we move into fall are the start of some hunting seasons.
Oh, I can't wait.
Coming up in the North Country, we've got some opportunities for youth to get out to hunt waterfowl and pheasant. And check out our website for more information on that. But these are opportunities to go out, learn safe and responsible hunting practices, and spend time with one of our environmental conservation police officers who accompany the youth on these hunts.
Yeah, it's really great to have that mentorship experience with bringing in the next generation of safe and responsible hunters in the state. I was excited to attend the Great New York State Fair this year and get my hunting license, and
Super
I'm really
fun.
excited to get out in the field this fall coming up. So folks out there, please save me some deer on the landscape. But we'll see how successful we are, but excited for hunting season coming up.
I'm sure you'll do great, Sean. Also in September, we've got Fish and Wildlife Day coming up. That is September 28th. We are also encouraging folks to see Fish and Wildlife Day as a stewardship day, a day for outside adventurers to give back to the state lands and sites they love and spend time on through a variety of ways. But we've got more information about stewardship opportunities on DEC's website as well.
That's great, and I'm looking forward to that day and getting out myself to help do some stewardship on the landscape. It's always good to get your hands dirty this time of year, of course, and enjoy all the fall weather that's out there in New York State.
100%.
Well, Erica, I think that brings us to the end of the show today. Obviously, please keep emailing us at contact@dec.ny.gov. Let us know how we're doing and what more you want to hear. We did get our first listener feedback question.
know,
I'm so
finally.
excited. We're going to cover that on our future episode when we talk to our Fish and Wildlife staff about hunting in New York State coming up here in the fall. So stay tuned for that coming up. But Erica, obviously, the governor wants us to get offline and what?
Get outside.
DEC Does What? Is a production of DEC's Division of Communication, Education, and Engagement. Our theme music is an original composition by Mike Menza, wildlife technician with DEC's Division of Fish and Wildlife. Like what you heard on this episode? Please leave a review and share this episode with others. Want to learn more about DEC's wide-ranging efforts to protect New Yorkers and the environment? Visit dec.ny.gov or connect with us on social media. You can find us using @NYSDEC. For more information on DEC Does What, visit dec.ny.gov/podcast.